Tucker Carlson was even talking about it, saying that Trump was elected because of the promise of anti-interventionism.
Absolutely. He called out Jeb Bush on stage. He called out George Bush.
And the Iraq War.
Yeah, and he's talked about the deep state. What president has ever talked about the deep state? He's called it by name. He called about the military-industrial complex. He's called out the FBI, the CIA. He said, we have blood in our hands. He's talked about NATO needs to be dismantled. He said the G7. Nobody else has ever wanted to dismantle that whole Western imperialist structure. Then he appoints a whole bunch of never-Trumpers, a whole bunch of neocons that he defeated in the election. And this is where anybody's guess, I guess, is as valid as anybody else's as to why this is, because it makes no logical sense. That is not the same thing as jihadi Salafist terrorism, but because of the profound undereducation. So America is in this war for 20 years on the war on terror, yet they don't know what jihadi Salafism is.
The following is intended for a mature audience. Proceed with the understanding that taboo and offensive material will be discussed. The revolution must be non-violent and it must occur in our minds, thus being the evolution we need to survive. The Evolution Revolution Podcast.
Hi, hello. This is the Evolution Revolution Podcast on IMN. Today I am joined by geopolitical analyst for the Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel, and political analyst for India Defense News, Miss India, and she's a rather fine actress. Her name is Preity Upala. I am also joined by the former senator of Trinidad and Tobago, Kirk Minku. He hosts a program on this network called Independent Thought and Freedom. It's a great program. And my co-host, Chad Wilson. And today we're going to be talking about the whole Iran situation and the killing of General Soleimani. And I'm just going to have our two guests introduce themselves. Kirk?
Hi, good evening to all the listeners, and I look forward to an enlightening conversation. I think that there's so much information that's totally contradictory. For someone who doesn't have the time to really look into it, I can understand it. It would be total confusion. They don't know who to believe, what side to believe. It's really sad that even something as basic as what the facts are is just not apparent to most people. But hopefully we can shed some light on that tonight.
Namaste, everyone. Happy New Year. So honored to be here, and this is going to be such a fantastic conversation, I think, and I'm sure we'll agree on a lot of things, maybe disagree on a few, but it's just amazing to bring into the awareness of our listeners, information and sort of the truth as we know it to the best of our abilities. This is the era of fake news and smearing and distortion and sort of misinformation. And it's so hard to sift through all of that to find out what's really true. But it does exist. And I think we'll attempt to do that. But it's going to be a fantastic conversation. Anything to do with that region in particular is always fascinating, especially to an American, because they're far removed from that in some way, and yet very much entangled, I think, by decisions made by their leadership. So I think we're going to have a blast, and it'll be enlightening for all of us.
Okay. So first I want to start from this angle. the embassy. The embassy was, I suppose, it was attacked by Iraqis, and it was a reaction to missile strikes in Iraq and Syria. Now, I am a constant opponent of, missile strikes in Iraq and Syria, so I can most definitely understand why, why people were definitely upset with that. And I don't know why that's a thing that's cited by the Trump administration, the embassy. I don't know. Is that? I don't know. Preity, give me your take.
It's like who started what, right? I mean, this is like a cat and mouse game sometimes. And, I think it's always important to be the bigger person. And I think the US being who it is in the world stage, on the world stage, I should say, I know that it's not okay when your citizens are being attacked, or because the US embassy in a foreign country is still US property, I suppose, or US space,
But I do have to button. I'm sorry, but I mean here in the States, the Venezuelan embassy was being overrun. So here in the States, we don't have too much respect for embassies, so.
Just in general in the world, nations' embassies in foreign sovereign countries are still their property. But I think the point I was trying to make is that being who they are on the global stage, they have to show more restraint than they do. I mean, there are many examples of situations where countries get bombarded by, cross-border terrorism or whatnot, and they have sort of consistently shown restraint, and it looks like they're a weak state, but in the long run, it ends up working in their favor because things aren't escalated as quickly. So I think the US can maybe take a leaf out of that. I think some of this is still new for them. I mean, and they're very reactive, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to weigh all the options and see, who's the culprit here, what's really going on, is there a better way to deal with this than take a very dramatic action, which is going to have very incredible consequences, not just for yourself, but for many other players involved. And seems like that wasn't thought about with this particular action that was taken. It's right for you to defend yourself. Absolutely. I'm all for that. I'm not about, hey, lay down and take it. But I think there's a way to do it. And maybe that wasn't thought out. And who really made these decisions? How many people had the intelligence of what had happened and what was going on? It seems also like some of these things were premeditated. I think the US intelligence had been following maybe the regime for a very long time, tracking sort of actions and movements. And in their own wisdom, they felt that this was the time, right, to take out someone that they thought was a bad actor. And that's on them, right? That's a decision that they made and they have to live with it. But it seems like the whole world is now involved. So it's just interesting to see how things are going to unfold.
I mean, I know that Iraq asked only one thing of the US. You keep your beef with Iran out of here. That was the one request that for permission to stay in that sovereign country, and we're not treating them like a sovereign country. 17 years after the WMD lie that led to invasion, we're still not treating them as a sovereign country.
Unfortunately, the U.S. doesn't treat anyone really as a sovereign country. I mean, that's really a sad fact. It's the arrogance of U.S. foreign policy. Of power, and they've so that's not surprising, that, and especially Iraq is seen as their protectorate, right, because of what happened. So there's this kind of dual view, that they are independent, but everybody knows that it's kind of like post World War II Germany and Japan in a sense, except a lot worse.
You know, my friend Nico House brought up the theory that that I mean, he was contesting the theory that the Saudis set Soleimani up.
Yeah. Well, I understand that the Iraqi PM said that he was meeting with Soleimani after a request from Donald Trump that they meet, and I can't remember what the agreement was. I can look it up, but are you aware of that? His complaint.
With Trump?
The prime minister's complaint was that Trump, requested that they meet with Soleimani, and then they assassinated their guest. I will look it up and get the details.
Because I think this was this was in the talks. This was in the making since October. And,
Pompeo. Yeah.
Well, not only that too. Let me interject too. This was one of those things that the one general guy, I guess it was a general, said many years ago, where they start in Iraq and then move to here, they've been talking about this. Is for me, the way that I look at it is from the macro perspective, and that they're doing so much dirt. We've been doing so much dirt, and every action causes a reaction, and at this point we should understand what we've done as a country, because we can look at at the list of the shit and then see how that's resulted. So for me, I'm completely just anti-bombing, anti-war, and I think most people kind of are. They don't want to fight because really it's these certain people at the top. What they say, that there's only a few people that are actually that know the real reason for war in general. So I guess from my perspective, I'm just tired of the bullshit, and I feel like there's always going to be an excuse. Somebody's always going to do something. And then everybody thinks they're right. I mean, wherever you grow up, whatever nationality, whatever culture, whatever religion, you're going to be told that you're right, and anything outside of that box is tough to get out of. So I just think the approach, the way we look at it, is so important at this point. With the internet, like we're communicating here. This is so huge, and I just think there's more options, regardless of who did what and what. I mean, the dirt we've done.
I think there's a real the lack of information and the lack of perspective that most Americans have. Like for instance, the invasion of Iraq after 9/11 and Afghanistan. It was not properly targeted, right? I mean, because everybody thinks that they're all the same. A lot of people didn't know the difference between Saddam Hussein, who was a secular nationalist, a socialist nationalist, as opposed to Osama bin Laden, who was a fundamentalist Wahhabi Saudi Muslim. But people don't understand the differences between the Baathists, the socialists, the Arab nationalists, the Salafists, the Wahabbis, the Shias. They don't know, they don't care.
I recently made the biggest blunder in the world when I was talking to Garland Nixon and Lee Stranahan of Fault Lines. That's a radio show with Radio Sputnik. Well, I legitimately said that I mixed up Iran with Iraq.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and then so not only do they mix up all these things, so they think that Iran and ISIS are on some equivalent level when there's no possible way to think of them on any equivalent level, and then not respecting nation states. So this is the top general of Iran that they just killed, and as if he were some ISIS terrorist, when he's not. I mean, it's the same level But again, it's part of the the ignorance in a sense. Now, on the other hand, I do want to say that I am not a total pacifist in that sense. I mean, I do believe there's such thing as a just war. I do believe that there is a right to self-defense, but I believe there's a principle of just war in how you decide what is a just war, and then how you go into it. And of course, that would need congressional approval. And I think I see Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders have started to introduce, I don't know how far it's going to go, an amendment to ensure that Congress is consulted. I mean, it's in the Constitution, so I don't know how much more you can do. It's just been ignored, but they want to put that in. But I think that, for instance, going to Congress and also bringing back the draft would do a lot to ensure that these reckless wars are not entered into. Because if people, first of all, get a chance to vote, whether they're going to spend trillions of dollars, and then whether the young men and women now, I suppose, I don't know if women would be included in a draft in today's time, but whatever, young people going out to die, I think, for example, I really believe that there might be only one war that the U.S. would agree to in Congress, and I think if they actually voted to go to war with ISIS, I think the U.S. would have agreed to it, and I think that would have been a just war. But this kind of random attack with mercenaries, and it's just a formula for endless war. And I mean, I will let the others speak, but one other thing I want to explore is the effect of killing this general, what it's going to have in the whole region. And I think in world politics, I think there's going to be some massive realignment. This is akin, as other people have said, this is akin to the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, which started World War I. And people don't really understand. I guess if we lived in, when did that assassination happen? 1917, was it? I can't remember the exact date, but I suppose in 1917, if we witnessed the assassination, we wouldn't have said, oh, well, this is going to lead to World War I, but it did. And when people were going through it, they didn't call it World War I. But I mean, so we're living through something that I think it's going to have profound effects that we can't even properly see now.
Preity, your take on your perspective on the effect?
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up realignment. This is so important. I speak a lot on US-India relationships, and one of the thorns of this relationship is actually each other's stance towards Iran, right? Because the US thinks that Iran is public enemy number one, and India does not. Exactly. India and Iran have had a civilizational connect. Persia and India, of course, they're very close. They have been for thousands of years. Yeah. It's for millennia, right? And yeah. Funnily enough, the Islamic Republic of Iran and Hindu India, if you can say that, are also very tight. So yeah. Despite the religion,
it's the Aryan heritage. Yeah. Iran means land of the Aryans. And
But and it's and nobody can take that away from them. I think if the US is going to ask India to take sides, I don't think India would be abandoning Iran for two reasons. Number one, for a country that has a population of 1.3 billion, they get 20% of their energy needs from Iran, and that's not going to change anytime soon unless someone can offer them a better deal, which I don't see happening. But the second reason is also to compete with China's BRI and CPEC and all those sinister plots that are happening as we speak, as the US is too busy talking about other issues like border control and abortions and stuff, China is rolling out their sort of imperialistic plans. And India is, of course, well aware of this. But Iran becomes a very important partner to India, because they are kind of partnered up to have their own version of, I guess, the CPEC or something like that, with Chabahar and other ports that are turning out to be quite, feasible and also very important. So for those two reasons, I don't think India would be foolish enough to abandon a true ally, even though their relationship with the US is inching ever so close. And I think this is the tightest that they've been, and both administrations really respect each other. I don't see, Iran being sort of kicked to the curb from India. And also the Minister of External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar, I think he was very clear when this happened. He expressed genuine concern for what had happened, and he left it at that. But I think that says it all, because he wasn't sort of gung-ho of, this is a great thing that happened and we need to take down these bad people and so on. Because India can be very hawkish in terms of counterterrorism and so on, because we've suffered for 70 years and even before that. But I think in this case, he was very clear of our position. And I think at the end of the day, he will do the right thing by India's needs, and right now those needs do point towards a very tight-knit relationship with Iran. And that also will be better for the whole region, not just the subcontinent, but also, Central Asia or Western Asia, as that region is called. So this is interesting because it's like geopolitically affecting a lot of actors like India who aren't, directly involved, right? This is supposed to be between two countries, but other people are pulled in and they have their own perspectives and they're not going to budge, and they shouldn't. I think they should do the right thing. So I think it'll be interesting to see how India's stance unfolds, because I also just wanted to finish by saying, I think India is one of the few countries in the world that has great relationships between both, because they're antagonistic to each other. So allies of the US wouldn't be pro-Iran, but India is. They're kind of non-aligned in that way.
You're taking off to India soon.
Yes.
And you're going to be speaking with Iran. Finish that.
Well, I'm going to be speaking at one of the top foreign policy think tanks, and he is one of the guests, guest of honors there. This is Javed Zahir.
He is an amazing man.
Yes.
He's an amazing
so hopefully
man.
I'll get to, and he's going to address. Yeah.
And he is foreign minister.
Isn't he foreign minister of Iran?
Yes, he is. And I've been actually retweeting his tweets and putting them on my Facebook page. He's been, in terms of things like Trump's, I can't believe, Trump's threat to destroy the cultural and heritage sites. That's exactly what the Taliban did with the bombing.
That's what ISIS does too.
Exactly. That's what ISIS did in Palmyra. I just can't believe that.
I discovered that the Iranian parliament just voted to officially label the U.S. military and Pentagon as terrorist entities.
Well, it's reciprocal, because I think the U.S. also labeled the Iranian either army or their special intelligence that this general was heading. They were labeled a terrorist group a while back,
Yet the ISI is not.
I know. I think this is like the big thorn, right? And I was wondering, if Modi took down General Bajwa of the ISI, how would the world react? And what would the US stand?
Because just with the CAA, they're saying how, look at the reaction. Imagine if they did this, which would have been justified. I would have
signed up for that vote, So I think this is what concerns me is, there are bad people everywhere, but when they're really bad people, and when the world has a right to curb real terrorism and real roots and funders and harbors of terrorism in the world, what's the world going to do? What's the US going to do? Because I think for 70 years, they've been very antagonistic to that.
Yeah.
you know, and India suffered as a result. And we've showed, I think, demonstrated incredible restraint, because we could have done a lot more damage than we have. And we only do a tiny bit of damage when we're attacked violently, right? This is very,
another
very
thing,
interesting.
the biggest jihadi forces are Saudi Arabia and state sponsors of Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, which are major US allies. And Iran is not a state sponsor of terror. What it is, it does fund Hezbollah, and and so that's the Lebanon-Israel war and conflict there. So, but that is not the same thing as jihadi Salafist terrorism. But because of the profound undereducation, so America is in this war for 20 years on the war on terror, yet they don't know what jihadi Salafism is. You know, it's and then you make serious blunders like this.
Yeah. They don't know who the bad guy is here. They're looking at a facade of a bad guy, the veneer of, you know, and they're going for it. It's good that they're trying to go for it if that's what they're really doing, but the aim is directed at the wrong place. And I would like to see them wake up, because there's nothing wrong with taking down, you know, really bad people who have killed thousands and are plotting to kill thousands, including US troops in Afghanistan. But Iran is not the one killing US troops in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden wasn't hiding in Tehran. We know exactly where he was hiding. And guess the most important is, Iran has 0 nukes, and Pakistan has the fastest growing nuclear program in the world. Exactly. So this is a really interesting situation, very sticky. And
good.
As things unfold, we'll find out, you know, if people are going to wake up or not, because I think right now they're buried in the sand with these kind of facts.
Well, I mean, I think generally nukes have been a deterrent for regime change.
Well,
foreign regime change. That's how I've always seen it. And,
let's always.
Iran is the enemy, and Pakistan is they got their nukes. So, nukes are a deterrent to a foreign regime change.
Well, and let's not forget though, back in 2016, that the Pentagon got caught spending $540 million to make fake terrorist videos. So we have to remember how propaganda works and how all these things are feeding into people's minds. So most of the problems are being caused by the kind of things that we are escalating, because we're putting money, energy, and effort really into making sure that these vacuums happen. I mean, what is this? The Syrian pipeline? Is that what? Is that? I guess what is it? The Syrian Iran pipeline. Whatever they go through, to Europe, and then there's
and Russia.
And then the Qatar is the other one. So that's why they want to go through Syria. So there's a lot of things. See, for me, I see it like, okay, well, all these little individual things are individual proof of the dirty that's happening. So pick your poison. Pick which one that you're passionate about, or that concerns you. I mean, we should be concerned about all of them, but it's hard, because there's so much going on. And once you can to have that base information, that base, hey, we're doing dirt, and we're doing propaganda and the state media and how all this stuff works, then you have to factor that into everything that we're doing. Of course, a lot of times they're going to throw in real information in there to try and, qualify things and make things seem real. And what's happening, I'm seeing, is that the discussion is very, very important, and I'm glad that it's happening. It is weird to see so many people just okay with murder and death. I mean, I just think, for me, I just think that where we are now with the connection, with internet, I mean, it's so huge. We don't realize the possibilities that we can do. I mean, we're being censored, Facebook and all these different ways, but it's so important that we take over the narrative, because that's how they keep their power. That's how they keep doing it, is controlling the narrative, which basically controls the masses. They tell you what to get upset about, what not to get upset. They design the parameters of discussion, of debate. So I factor all this stuff in to everything, and even those people that are quote unquote bad, at this point, you know, we look all the things that we've done to cause damage and to cause these vacuums, cause these, there has to come a point where we have to reconcile that as a country in a real way that allows people, the ones that we consider bad or whatnot, to change their heart. I mean, not to say that's going to bring back anything or whatnot. It's just I'm trying to find some sort of line, some sort of thing where people can really join, and anti-corruption, anti-imperialism, this corruption shit is so huge. And like what we've talked about, I've seen it where there's a lot of people on the Trump side that they think Trump's the vehicle for that thing. That's one of the main reasons why they support that. They have to pick a side, out of the two-party system. So again, I think, and I'm just looking at the sentiment, like what do people want? Like, because a lot of our boilerplate and wedge issues are just the result. We're arguing the results of the bullshit, of the bad policies. They're not real. They're not the causes. They're not the root reasons. And we're not arguing the reasons why they're happening, and understanding why someone thinks a certain way. Why these echo chambers, why these cultural things are the way that they are. So I'm just adding that in because I'm excited to see so much outpouring against the imperialism, and to me that says something. Of course, it's weird because you do see a lot of Trumpsters that are very pro, killing a guy, which is I wouldn't have expected. It's odd in general, just because of, and I'll go back to the Russiagate and the FISA court thing. Those two specific things were so heavily in the media and going against Trump that it only left his supporters arguing against real shit, not you know what I mean, not where the war crimes, not the things that really matter. It's the bullshit which gave them validity in their message, which they had high ground going against left, going against the media and whatnot.
Yes.
So
something that Lee Stranahan said, oh goddamn. Someone else talk. Okay, never mind. Okay, I'm back. Okay. So something that Lee Stranahan said, Pompeo is not really someone you would generally translate as pro-Trump, neither John Bolton.
Exactly.
And
his administration is full of never-Trumpers. It's just insane.
Because he's the patsy.
Why he would do that.
He's the patsy.
It seems so, because Tucker Carlson was even talking about it, saying that Trump was elected because of the promise of anti-interventionism.
Absolutely. He called out Jeb Bush on stage. He called out George Bush.
And the Iraq War.
Yeah, and he's talked about the deep state. What president has ever talked about the deep state? He's called it by name. He called about the military-industrial complex. He's called out the FBI, the CIA. He said, we have blood in our hands. He's talked about NATO needs to be dismantled. He said the G7. Nobody else has ever wanted to dismantle that whole Western imperialist structure that really comes back from the old colonial days and is just a survival of all that, But it's like he's a non-aligned. He was like speaking like a non-aligned movement leader from
populist.
But then he does this.
Yes, because it's then he appoints a whole bunch of never-Trumpers, a whole bunch of neocons that he defeated in the election, and this is where anybody's guess, I guess, is as valid as anybody else's as to why this is, because it makes no logical sense.
Well, see, I think I think part of it has to do with cutting out the movement on the left, because all they have to do is Trump can say something true, which is Hillary Clinton's a crook, or say
Yeah.
something true about Russiagate, about them lying to the FISA court, about say something true, and then the left, liberal, whatever. I separate the two because the way the mind structure. They get so outraged about everything, like they're like, oh well, if Trump said it, it must not be true completely. That's like
the Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah.
well, Trump, it's controlled opposition. It's like when Tucker Carlson, I don't agree with Tucker Carlson, but if he says something real, something straight, I almost feel like they're doing it on purpose, because what it does is it automatically makes the left dismiss those points, because you see they attach it to Trump, or they attach it to certain things. So that's the problem. We can't even have an honest discussion where it's like what Hillary Clinton was talking about doing and all these different things. It's just like, again, that's the lesser of two evils argument that everybody can have, because you're focused on specific things, or what comfortable things. People are more uncomfortable with Trump's, it's like, but Obama, they're super comfortable because he's got a smile to your face, while bombing.
That's right.
So I wanted to acknowledge that, because I really feel like that's the thing, because the hardest part for people like me, I could say, is like when I could criticize Trump, I'm a Clinton supporter. When I criticize Clinton, I'm a Trump supporter. So like that's it's part of the mindset, which has allowed me to, I guess I feel like I'm becoming less emotionally responsive to some of these things, because I'm understanding how the manipulating people into thinking things, and so and of course that's one of the reasons why I'm running for president, the nomination. It's just it's so it seems so simple to understand that all of our viewpoints, how we look at it, is there's so many of these different things that make up our ideals, or make up our the way we look at things, because your culture, your tribe, how they look at things is how you look at things. A long habit of not knowing a thing wrong gives it the superficial appearance of being right. That's Thomas Paine. So that would be my why they're so heavy on it, which again makes me think that to an extent that Trump obviously is on it, because he knows the structure of the game, to an extent.
Okay, Miss Upala.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few points. I mean, this is such a dangerous game for everyone, and what happens when something like this goes on is, unfortunately, as I'm specifically talking about the left, they tend to do this. They will now sanitize everything. They're going to make all, who's celebrating this the most? It's the actual jihadists, right? It's the real Islamists, because they're like, hey, we can sort of get away with this, because now they're going to be kind of viewed as benign a little bit, or I've seen it all over social media. On the one hand, there's crazy people,
Just to add to what you're saying quickly, the U.S. has actually suspended its operations against ISIS to prepare for an attack from Iran. So ISIS is now left free. Yeah, so
that's true.
On.
You have to be, I think, because I've seen a lot of outrage from the other side, from the left, who are sort of making him out to be like this great humanitarian Buddha or something like that, and that's not the case either. I think one of the big fault lines I keep hearing on the left is, I think their understanding of this this global jihad movement, or political Islam, the whole Islamofascism, all of these, and comparative religion and ideology is so poor. They're so clueless about the real history. They don't realize that the global jihad movement has been going on for 1400 years. Since the very inception, it just takes different forms. There are a ton of Islamic terrorist groups who hate each other. They can constantly kill each other. And that doesn't, and just because there's one terror group, maybe the Hamas, they may be against ISIS, but that doesn't mean that they're good. They're all bona fide terror groups. And I think what the left is, what I see a lot in the left is they kind of sanitize the whole thing, where suddenly anybody who's fighting ISIS is the good guy, even though it may be a Hamas or I mean, there's a ton that fall into that category. So this kind of incident, they're sort of making, kind of a martyr or a hero out of someone who, I'm sure he had his own history. I mean, I think recently something was circulated where it was the picture of the hijacking that happened at the US consulate in Iran, and this general's photo was there along with the people that were caught. So if he was, and he was very young, but if he was involved in that, then the US was tracking that for, I guess, decades now. But so it's important to really dig for the truth and be careful with the facts, because I don't want to see a situation where, like ISIS is now left free and they're
just in.
to do bad stuff.
Sorry, just in breaking news, they hit the base in Iraq. Iran hit our base in Iraq, it looks like.
Okay.
Well, they're gonna be kicked out soon anyway, because the Iraqi parliament voted for troops to leave. But
I mean, we violated neutral soil. The agreement that was made was keep the beef out of here. Iraq has already suffered the brutality of U.S. military might. And, they don't want any part in this crap. Anyway, Miss Upala.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because I mean, also the US troops are there in Iraq on the invitation of the Iraqi government. So if this was a while back, right? So I was just reading somewhere that some analyst was talking about this. I mean, yes, there was a vote to kick out the troops, but if that does happen, that's actually illegal, because the reason for them being there, they came to come there in a different route, so they actually can't be kicked out. They would legally and technically they can't, so they're not going anywhere. I mean, it's yeah.
Well,
interesting.
I was going to say, like, I mean, we know that the invasion originally was wrong. You know what I mean? That was lied. So the reason why we're there, and we killed, what they say, over 1 million Iraqis have died, something like that, since the start. So I mean, we've done so much damage. Like, what do we expect to happen when we fuck with people so much over and over and over again, and putting money and energy, like, the way I look at the ISIS thing, the Al Qaeda thing, like, the movement may be there, but there's a reason why that movement has got so much money into it, is because of what we're doing. Obviously, that was the point of our government in order to go through these things. That's how I'm seeing it. I mean, because if you're doing Al Qaeda videos, they're getting the weapons from Saudi Arabia. Even in the WikiLeaks thing, it said that in Hillary Clinton, they said that when they gave it to Qatar and the weapons, the $100 million worth of weapons, whatever, to Qatar and Saudi Arabia, that they know that they're funding ISIS, in there. So it's so, I mean,
this Saudi Wahhabi ideology is the driver of global jihad.
Yes.
And that is a fact that the U.S. cannot face, because the Saudis are their biggest allies, and that's a permanent, it's a permanent contradiction. And the same thing with Al Qaeda and Bin Laden in Afghanistan and Taliban. So it's these monsters that they create and play with for geopolitics that not only come back and bite them, but it causes havoc in the region. It causes underdevelopment, poverty, and death. And I mean, Asia is that part of Asia, Western Asia in particular, is a total mess. Because of it, all this intervention, and this fundamental lack of understanding, which plays into the hands of some of the bigger manipulators perfectly, because then they get to switch sides without anybody understanding they're switching sides, because to them everybody's the same, but in fact they're playing different sides off each other. The US was supporting Al Qaeda and ISIS proxies in Syria, against Assad, who was secular and protecting the Christians and the Alawites and the minorities, but somehow Assad was the monster.
I must ask Miss Upala if she's seen the WikiLeaks on the OPCW in Syria.
No, I haven't.
Well, the WikiLeaks basically state that a top official of the OPCW, which is Organization for Prevention of Chemical Weapons, top official was saying anything that contradicted the chlorine gas attack narrative was to be discarded
and not included in the report.
So just with that, I've seen some testimonies on some stuff going on with the white helmets, but that WikiLeaks, that just puts the nail in the coffin of that narrative. It's just like the lie about WMDs, the lie about
Afghanistan papers. The Afghanistan papers just came out. I mean, all this stuff is like, and I was going to say that U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said, quote, "No decision made to leave Iraq, period." And they said, of course, it does not constitute a policy change by the letter that they sent. So that was what.
It's like someone had a brilliant quote somewhere. I heard they said it's like quicksand, right? I mean, they want to get out, but their actions only pull them deeper and deeper into the region to a point where they may never leave. And of course, I mean, the Iraq war and the Iraq situation is very different from the Afghan situation. The Afghan situation is very sinister and with many different actors involved, and there's a lot that the public doesn't know about. And it's the real reason for being there is something quite different from what's being told. I just wanted to point out there's two different things here, and it's important not to conflate them. This sort of fake narrative of weapons of mass destruction and going there and trying to find them, which never existed, is one thing. But a very real, religious terrorism movement, whether it's the global jihad movement or these groups, these are very real too, and these are mutually exclusive, right? They're not the same thing. And if you sort of, now with the Iraq situation, if you just kind of wipe that out, you can't say that the other doesn't exist, because it does. It's a very real thing, and it's actually, I think, the greatest threat for the world. But it's happening in a very subversive way now. They don't even need to do it with war and weapons. They're doing it with population explosions. And, sorry to say, but in Western countries, when you have all kinds of bad actors getting into politics and slowly, I mean, you should see what's happening in Canada. It's very scary what some of the laws that have been passed. And where the laws are coming from, and they're slowly changing the nature of these Western countries. So there's that too. So I think and this sort of jihad movement or religious fundamental terror is not a result of Western imperialism, because it's been around way before America even existed. America is a very new country. This has been going on for 1,000 years. And in India, we had 800 years of this horrible invasion and conversion and genocide, right? And now it's just happening in a different way. So I think people need to keep those things, two things separately. And then I think they need to be educated and informed in the history. And this is an ideological warfare, and the only way to deal with it is you have to curb the funding, because when they run out of money, they won't be able to do shit. But no one seems to get that, or no one seems to do, when in the past governments have given hundreds of billions of dollars to some of these rogue actors, and all of that money goes into their new program or their terror camps and terror harboring and training, it's not okay, right? So I think people need to be very nuanced and level-headed and have an honest conversation of the problem, that there is one. It's very deep, it's ancient, it's ideologically driven, and how do we curb it, rather than this other BS like, oh, let's go to the wrong place and wipe them out, and that didn't do anything for eradicating this kind of religious terrorism. It only increased it. So I think it's a big fault line, I think.
I was going to say too, what you're saying. I mean, I agree with you as far as like the ideology stuff. And I think that's more of, a religion thing too. Cause I mean, Christians slaughtered people, so it's one thing to say, okay, well, a religion, extremist religions, are a problem. And we have to look at and understand how people, with power and money use these faith-based things, use these things, fan the flames in order to use it for political reasons. So I understand what you're saying as far as like the ideology, obviously has been around, but of course everything's been around, but everything changes in time anyway, just because of the group, or as things evolve. But it definitely would not be the same extreme where it's at in the way that we're told. You know what I mean? So again, the way that we're told are about like these major events or whatnot, that we don't really know all of the underlying things of who's involved and what's going on. What most of the hijackers of 9/11 were Saudi Arabia, from Saudi Arabia. So it's like I'm trying to get past. I'm trying not to look at the religion thing too much and just understand, anything can be hyped up and I mean, look at the way sports games are. Motherfuckers get crazy about sports. I mean, crazy, and they'll
they don't
fight.
blow up buildings. That's the difference. I mean,
they'll
you
wreck
can't
cars.
You can't sanitize the religious aspect of it, because that's what's driving it. And yes, I would say all the Abrahamic religions are terrible, but some are not. We're talking about one specific one today, and maybe 2,000 years ago it was a different story, but today, 2020, it's very different. And you can't sort of overlook that, which I think I see that a lot with the left. And it only angers the right even more, that kind of gives them flames, because they feel they're like, this is not a fair conversation, when the truth is really staring at us. I think the facts are there, right? Do you agree?
I think that a lot of, I guess you could say secular analysts, they won't even think, we won't even think of ourselves as secular, just second nature. When you speak about military affairs or whatever, or geopolitics, would be shocked at the way Christian Zionism, and Islamic eschatology drive world affairs, like on Jerusalem, right? So everybody wants, so the Christian Zionists are funding the Zionists a lot, and like moving the capital. They think that the rapture is going to come, and all this sort of stuff that's going on in American, specifically American Christianity. And then of course you have the Jewish Zionism, the original Zionism, which not even all, I was banned from YouTube because I interviewed a rabbi who spoke about how Zionism is against the spirit of Judaism itself, because it's arrogance. But that's another issue we could talk about. And then you have the Islamic world, then, who think that the world is going to be under Islam finally, and the Holy Land will be liberated, and Jerusalem, which was the capital of the original, what do they call it, Holy Land, I suppose, and which they conceive of as Muslim, has to be brought back under Islam. So this thing is going on, and it's real, and it's informing presidents of the United States, prime ministers of Israel, prime ministers, presidents, kings, and whatever in the Arab world. And a lot of people are talking about bombs and guns and budgets and they're not understanding the fanaticism underneath it all that ultimately does, as Preity said, come
I
from
would
Abrahamic
like to run something past both you and Preity.
Okay.
So it has to do with okay, so this is just an idea I've had for a very long time. What if Jerusalem was governed by a secular state, separate from the Palestinians and the Israelis? I mean,
now during the Caliphate, right? So during the up to during the Ottoman Caliphate, the Third Caliphate, for example, there was no problem in the Holy Land. The Roman Catholics had their representative. The Orthodox Church had their representative. The chief rabbi of Palestine had his representative. I believe the Shias had one as well, and the Sunnis had one. And it was not, if you read world history and world geopolitics, the Holy Land was not an issue. It was not an issue until the end of World War I. And a lot of people, most people say they don't understand what World War I was about. It was senseless. It was maybe some nationalism gone crazy. But my analysis of it, which I probably should write, but that would be, to give it justice, would have to be like a Arnold Toynbee type of 14-volume thing or something. But really, it was about the destruction of empire and monarchy and religious-based empire. So that means the destruction of the Ottoman Caliphate, it was the destruction of the Holy Roman Empire in Europe. It was the destruction of the Protestant Empire, the German one as well. But so the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So these things were destroyed. And when the Ottoman Empire was destroyed, it was a whole bunch of little, like Lawrence of Arabia, propped up this criminal House of Saud who were they were running alcohol and arms and all sorts of stuff. And they got all these little rebellious groups, and it was all funded to break up the Ottoman Empire, which was modernizing and so forth. And you see, because in the Muslim world, here at Wilder's, who you may revile, but he does have some interesting things to say. And one of his arguments, which should be taken seriously, is that Islam is more a political ideology than a religion. And if you ever read the Quran,
yes,
I would, to me, it seems more like a.
Totally agree. It's a political.
It's not a philosophical document as such. Right?
Yeah.
And that it is a set of rules, and that is what Islam is. And when you had a caliph sitting in Istanbul, who could adjudicate over all the quarreling elements, the Islamic world was relatively peaceful. But when you took that away, and then you had Al-Wahhab, who allied with these decadent House of Saud and said everybody should go back to the 6th century, and then you had a next set over here and another one here. Confusion in the whole region. Then they made up these fake countries of Iraq and Syria and Jordan, and it was just confusion, and that's what we're living in. We are living in this confusion, and unless that issue is sorted out, it's just going to be forever and ever. And Trump, as much as I supported him in terms of wanting to pull America out and dismantle that whole system, he's not, unfortunately, educated enough to know about all this stuff, and I think he's been manipulated by the neocons and into a stupid position, which he's just done. And real complexity and challenge of the region to bring stability there, we're further, and we're just getting so much farther away, like the quicksand produced.
Yeah.
Miss Upala.
Well, I also, a lot of these, a lot of these Middle Eastern countries, they're very oil rich, right? And they're rich because it's oil money, it's quick money, so they have the financial resources to push their agenda and their propaganda, and they do it not overtly, very subversively, through academic institutions, funding media corporations, and then you end up with these horrible headlines and you think, what's going on here? That's because you have to see where some of the financing is coming for. Sadly, a lot of the left mainstream outlets have fallen in this trap. That's why.
If I could elaborate on what you're saying,
Yes.
because in Trinidad and Tobago, we had the only Islamic coup, right? A coup by an Islamic group, an attempted coup, which happened in 1990. And that radical branch of Islam was essentially funded by Wahhabi charity. There's something in Islam, you see, and this is one of the things that people need to understand about religion and stuff like that, not just this, called zakat.
Zakat, yes.
Muslims are obliged to pay like tithes. Zakat is like a tithe, 10% of your income. And now in 1973, when this Saudi state had this billions of dollars, not only did the Saudi state have billions, all the citizens did. And they had to give 10% of that in charity. And this charity was in the form of their fundamentalist Wahhabi religion. So they funded all sorts of groups in Russia, in Chechnya, in Nigeria, which is where Boko Haram came, in the Philippines, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Guyana, in all these places where poor Muslim communities,
yes,
and they lived peacefully side by side. They had Sufi traditions, they had all sorts of other traditions, which all of a sudden, when these Wahhabi missionaries came with all their money to build mosques, to give religious lessons, they started to tell these people the type of Islam you're following is wrong. Like in Trinidad, they said the type of Islam you're following is too Hindu, it's too Indian. You have to de-Hinduize Islam. And whatever. So maybe in the Philippines, they'd say the same thing. In Russia, they'd say the same thing. In Nigeria, and all these groups, when you look at the history, it goes back to the funding from Saudi Arabia, right down to 9/11, right? And these things need to be understood, and I just wanted to bring that up because, in the whole discussion, it's just seen as Muslim terrorism, and it's so much more complicated than that. And if we had that precision, you wouldn't do a precision strike on Soleimani. You do a precision strike somewhere else.
Right. And there's a big difference between an Indian Muslim and a fundamental person in the Arab world. Huge difference. Even though it's the same religion, they obviously read the same text, but
Indonesia,
the way they
in Malaysia, exactly.
I think the number of ISIS, people who signed up for it from India, a country of a billion, 1.3 billion people, second largest Muslim population in the world, is minuscule. And you have like 10,000 from the UK, right? And a lot of these included white Brits, right? Like they suddenly got indoctrinated. It's very hypnotic. It's kind of they romanticize this sort of fundamental ideology of the caliphate and of the kafir and the believer. And oh my God, it's very easy. It's very, very easy to get brainwashed. And the madrasas are the real culprit here. And I think some countries in Europe are banning them. That's a start. They should be, and they shouldn't be seen, that act shouldn't be seen as communal, because it can be, but you have to really be honest about, where this indoctrination is coming from, the sources, because they're very benign sources. They're very, you wouldn't think that it's bad, but it is. The damage that it does is enormous. And it's very separating. It separates the believer from the non-believer. And then you end up with the hatred for the non-believer. Either you convert them or...
And not only is it directed against non-Muslims, it's directed against
each other.
Ahmadiyyas. They attack the Sufis. They attack the Shias. And other Muslim groups are equally, victims. The Alawites in Syria. It's really but these things are not analyzed. And it's incredible that, after being at war for 20 years,
You need
so-called
to know why
returned.
you're in war and to
Yeah.
and
And
with
with whom?
yes.
Yeah. But
Thi-
I think
the thing
I
too.
think it's yeah.
Go ahead. I was
No,
gonna say.
if America gets, I think that's the real solution. They need to be educated on all of this sort of history of this and ideology and all of that stuff. And but it's politically incorrect, sadly. And the left has a big part to play in this sort of standardization that they've done, because they've made it a crime almost to discuss these things that are very real conversations that need to be had. So there's this unholy alliance, between the left and sort of the Islamists, which is very concerning for people who are in the know. And as long as there is that unholy alliance, no one's going to be having important conversations, or if they are, they're going to be branded immediately as something unsavory, and they're going to be blacklisted. And it's just you're shooting yourself in the foot if you take that approach, and before you know it, it'll be too late. And I think I see that for the West. I am concerned for the West. I think in India we know what the problem is. We're trying to I think heal it from if in our own way, but we are well aware of what goes on, because I think after 1,000 years of persecution and genocide and invasion, I think we've well understood sort of the mindset. But in America especially, and in Europe even more so, they're very new to this thing, and it's almost like a shock. They still keep defending it because they don't want to come off as being bigoted or racist, especially because of their bloody dark history. But it's like very, very sticky situation.
There's a little bit with that too when it comes to, because of the whole Christianity thing here too, and there's a mind fuck that's going on. I was raised in Pentecostal, grandpa,
Right.
grandma, uncle, all these people were pastors, preachers. My dad's still an evangelist, travels, sings. I traveled when I was growing up, so I saw a lot of this. So it's like a cognitive dissonance that's going on,
Yeah.
and it's like. It's just like your schools, churches. It's all the same. It's just its own version of all these different versions of how they read the scripture, or how they interpret it or whatnot. So you see a lot of that, and it's weird because, like, if you try to have the discussion to say, hey, about being bigoted, because the church has, it's like you're taught, like, if you don't say something, you're going to hell, or like you're taught to have this passion about witnessing to somebody, tell somebody to feel bad, about somebody's eternal soul if they smoke a cigarette. This is, it's a mind fuck, that the way that they so which is weird. And I'm only going to get to this because it's like, you've got the Catholic Church, you've got 30,000 whatever different versions of Christianity, but you got the Catholic Church here that's doing some real dirty stuff, with all the pedophile shit that's going on. That's obviously clear. It's obviously a real problem, but you have, the church is silent on it. I went at a lot of people that I grew up with, a lot of family, friends, and stuff. It was a few years ago. Now, it was when the outrage was about the way that they were doing about Muslims, and how you treat people. So there is a weird situation, because you want to say, yeah, obviously not everybody is a jihadist terrorist. You know what I mean? So you have to acknowledge the degree and how this works. So, but it's weird because, having to have this conversation and say, it messes you up, because you're trying to say something, and then you're and when the cognitive distance is really big. Like I noticed that with my pops and stuff, like with that, because I'm trying to explain to him, obviously, you could, if you break it down person to person, not everybody is bad, right? Of course, right? So when you break it down, it's like he acknowledges certain things, but when you start looking at the whole picture, it becomes blanketed again. It becomes a whole thing, and of course that's how we're taught to compartmentalize culture and different thing, so with all these subcultures. And so I the religion thing is, it's not just Islam, You know, there's shit's happening with Christianity here too. I mean, they didn't even put "In God We Trust" until the Red Scare, the whole thing back in the 50s or whatnot. So um, uh, it's important. It's religion is so it was I'm passionate about it because I've seen great people with great hearts, have faith, and I mean I grew up around it, but you also see the dirt too and how people act and what they dismiss, and it's okay because they're Christian. It's weird. It's like people have you know in the Christian world, if you say you're Christian or you mention this or mention that, automatically you give that person more credibility or more respect because they say that, not because of actions or behavior, but because of what they claim or what they you know so it's there's there's this is not an easy situation to deal with, because it's faith. And I try to say it like to my pops, like, you know, it's your faith. You know what I mean? I hate talking about that. And that's the other thing too, is like when someone says faith, I don't like to be faith based. It's not faith. So it's just like, um, it's politically correct. You don't know what to say sometimes because you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And it's the same way in the Christian world, and you're not even allowed to talk about it. You're not even allowed to talk about it within the Christian community because you feel uncomfortable. Like, I mean, that makes people feel uncomfortable. Even have the discussion to, you if you think you feel bad, you feel wrong. So there's a big mind fuck that I mean, religion does to us. And
So
yeah,
yeah, Miss Upala.
I,
So
I think I think the world could do without organized religion. I think we should all just take the dharmic path, whatever that is for you, and just to, have be a good person, connect with universal consciousness, and find your dharma in life, and follow it, and just know that you're connected to everyone else. We're all one, and we're connected to animals and nature too, right? These are fundamental beautiful principles of all the Indic faiths. And I always make a distinction between organized sort of Abrahamic religions and then Indic dharmic paths. They're really not even religions, they're just knowledge systems, they're philosophies, ways of life. In case of Hinduism, it also happens to be a civilization too. So, I think the world in some way is moving towards that. While I see all of this gunk, I also see more people looking east, more people, finding themselves and finding the peace. And I see a lot of light too. I see more people evolving than ever. I think there's this amazing paradigm shift. And remember, this is the Kali Yuga, this is the dark ages. We'll see a lot of the darkness, but this is when the light needs to come out, and it's upon all of us to step up and be the light, which we all can be, and we all are, from the depths of our soul. And the more darker it gets, the more brighter your light shines, and the more your light is needed, I think, in the world. So I'm happy. I think we're living in a beautiful world, and just coming back from Thailand and seeing just all the peace and the wonderful shrines, and just how people are so mindful. And there's a beautiful marriage there of all of the Buddhist principles, but then they have all these amazing Hindu deities, which is wonderful, right? So it's just, I think that's the way the world needs to go towards. Yeah, the truth is always out there, and the truth triumphs. I think it's eternal, right? It lasts everything. What's not true will fizzle away and dissolve. That's the only we can have trust in that sort of, that's the law of nature, I think.
So, as mentioned earlier, you're going to be taking a trip to India.
Yes.
And yeah, I guess you're going to be at the same event, speaking at the same event as a as the foreign minister.
As Javed Sahir, yeah. I mean, well, Scott Morrison was the Prime Minister of Australia, who's under a lot of heat right now, because while the country is ablaze, he's off on vacation. I actually really like Scott Morrison a lot. He's a very likable guy. But yeah, I think with the fire situation, he has not been very responsible. But he's a guest of honor at this event, so he's going to give an address. And the Russian foreign minister is going to be there too. So there'll be a bunch of people. Yes, wow. Sergei Lavrov, exactly. And I'd love to, I don't know, maybe I'll get to speak to these. Yeah, I mean, they're all wonderful, interesting people. And it's in Delhi, which I love. But I'm going to go to Istanbul first. So that'll be interesting, to sort of go through Turkey to get to India and maybe spend some time in Turkey before coming back and see what the political environment there is. It shall be very interesting.
Well, just what else do you plan to do in India?
Oh wow, I have a whole week after this event, and I'm thinking of going to Jaipur because I've been invited to go to the Jaipur International Film Festival. That's happening, but so are some other events. So I've never been to Jaipur, which is a very, very beautiful city with palaces and the best 5-star hotels in the world are there. The Oberoi Raj Villas, the Umaid Bhavan, the Leela Palace, just stunning. And if I'm the luckiest person in the world, I'll get to go have tea there or lunch or something. So that's the plan. I'm manifesting to spend some time in Jaipur and of course enjoy Delhi a little more. And I'm sure I'll be meeting all kinds of interesting folks during this event, and that'll lead to other things, So, but I'm talking.
If you don't mind, what's the event in Delhi called?
Yeah, it's the Raisina Dialogues. Yes, by the Observer Research Foundation. It's a top foreign policy think tank.
Yeah, really, that is a top of the line.
Top of the top, baby. This is the big leagues now, and but I got invited, and my topic is actually not. I thought I was going to talk about. I thought I was going to be asked to talk about U.S.-India relations. No, it's actually a very spiritual topic. It's Dharma in the digital age. So how would you combine your purpose and spirituality in the modern world, in today's sort of tech world, So that's going to be interesting. And I have a good time slot, so I will prepare for that and hope to influence some people.
I do wish you the best. Is there anything that demands discussing before we conclude this?
Yes, I mean, actually, I don't know if Kirk might be very interested to, give me his input on this topic, but I just wanted to touch on the CAA issue in India, because while I was in Delhi, the one day I was ironically supposed to be going to a large security conference, and they sent a car for me, and I was unable to go to this event because of the riots, and that made me really look deeper into this. Now CAA is it's fizzled now. I think the truth of the matter is coming out, but essentially the government of India passed, this is very much like the 370 thing, it's like a bill that's passed in parliament with 2/3 majority, done in a democratic process, something that's long time coming. It's a good thing. It essentially gives Indian citizenship to persecuted non-Muslim minorities in our neighboring countries, 3 countries to be specific, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, because these 3 countries have a state religion, they're Muslim majority, they're Muslim theocracies, and they have a history of their minorities being persecuted by law. So I think India knew that it had a duty, and it's not just Hindus, it's actually anyone other than Muslims, because if you're a Muslim in a Muslim majority country, you would not be considered a minority person, right? You would be one of the majority, but it's a good thing. But oh my God, the reaction on the streets and some of the Western media, some of the liberal left, they've turned into goons, and they're vandalizing the country, public property, universities, and they're screaming discrimination when there is zero discrimination in this. This is not, has nothing to do with Indian citizens. It's to do with these refugees that have come from the persecuted countries, and they deserve that refuge, and now they get to be Indian citizens, and some have been living in India forever without really any real documentation or any citizenship, and now they get to have it. It's a very small number of people, but the outrage has been just the damage to public property is so sad. And it's just, it was a concerted effort it's like a conspiracy. They went and told the minority community in India that your citizenship is under attack, which is not. And this mob believed it. And now there's all these political things, but I think it's really dying down because it's baseless. And it's not, it doesn't have any more ground. But I'm curious to hear what Kirk has to say about this.
Before that, I just want to say real quick.
Yeah.
I just want, while Kirk speaks, I want him to speak about one of his guests, Shashi Tharoor.
Oh yeah.
I think that's all I want to say.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Shashi Tharoor is an amazing man. He's erudite. I mean, wonderfully spoken and an amazing vocabulary. There's a whole trend to see what new words he can stupefy people with in his conversations. He's extremely witty. He's so cultured and polished and knowledgeable that he's really an amazing man. But and I did have him as a guest to speak about the CAA, and he was very much against it and very much leading against it. And I mean, I won't get too much into into my disagreement with him on it, but you see, the whole problem, I think, has to do with the understanding of history and the value we place on history, right? Because I think one of the problems that I have with Shashi Tharoor's position is that he's seeing India as just any other country. So there should be no recognition that it is the home of Hinduism or Buddhism, or it's just another country and everybody should be treated the same. And I mean, that is a typical liberal worldview, that everywhere is equally the same as everywhere else. So you can migrate to this country, migrate to that country, and you go here and you go there, and everywhere is just almost like a free-for-all in a sense, and there's no real national identity. Right? So that's one part of it. And with the CAA Act, the Citizenship Amendment Act, what people forget is that Pakistan and what is now called Pakistan and Bangladesh, which before was called West Pakistan and East Pakistan, and before that was India, right? That when those Muslims who decided that they could not live with other people and they wanted a state for themselves, which itself is a remarkable thing that the world accepts. Because if any other group were to say that, they would be called racist, separatist, or supremacist, or whatever, because that would be the definition. So this partition happened with lots of bloodshed. We don't know, and we have no idea of the millions of people that suffered and the repercussions to this day. That traumatic event still has scars today. People who've lost property and whose ancestral homes are either now in Bangladesh or in Pakistan and so forth. But there are Hindus that stayed behind in Pakistan, right? And in fact, more Muslims decided to stay in India than leave to go to Pakistan. So that itself is an interesting fact, right? And there were some Hindus that decided to stay in Pakistan, but then Pakistan broke up into Bangladesh and West Pakistan because there was an ethnic strife between the Punjabi Muslims of West Pakistan and the shorter, darker Bengali Muslims of what is now Bangladesh and was East Pakistan. So that was a civil war that resulted in the split up there. And then those states became officially Muslim states where Islam was the state religion. And the minority populations of the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Jains, the Parsis, the Christians, they went from, I mean, collectively, I think it was something like 12% of the population, if not more, and then down to like 1.5%. Just an incredible shrinking of the population. So what India has said is that, listen, there are a lot of refugees in India, and you have 12 years in order to get citizenship. That's the normal process. That has not been taken away from anybody. But those people who were left behind in partition, so those Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Christians, who were left behind and in what became an Islamic state, if you're here in India before 2014, I think it was, we'll just shorten the process for you so that it's 6 years. Because really the world has forgotten about these people. They really don't care about what has happened to these people that have been left behind. And so it's basically, you guys can come in and go through the process after 6 years instead of 12 years. And everyone else, including Muslim refugees, can claim your citizenship like everyone else. It's just that the former Indian nationals before partition, you get 6 years earlier, right? So you can debate whether you like that or not or whatever, but by no means is that a genocide. By no means is that a Hindu fascist state. By no means is that the expulsion of Muslims. This was turned into, it turned into a Holocaust, right? As if Modi was Hitler ordering, Muslims into ovens or something. It's insane. It was just shortening the process for people who were formerly Indian nationals who found themselves in Muslim states being persecuted for their religion because those states were formed explicitly on a religious basis. So, and there was no rational discussion of it. It was just Modi, evil, Hitler. Just like Trump, orange man, Hitler, bad. It's the same thing, and it's, in a sense, this Soleimani thing is almost like that too, with the ignorance of the difference between the Shias and the Sunnis and the jihad, Salafist jihadis and the Iranian state. Again, without putting it into a proper historical context, it's just become simplified and people push their political agendas and it causes real harm and destruction. But
so to conclude this, I want to get some closing thoughts from everyone, and we'll start with Miss Upala.
Oh wow! Well, look, like I said, I'm a hopeless optimist. I really believe in this amazing paradigm shift that we're going through. I think it'll all work out in the end. The truth always triumphs, and the light always survives. I think it's the duty of each one, all of us, to just be the light and search for the truth. Sort of my hope, especially for Americans, is to really do their research and try to gain some understanding of these very complex, nuanced issues, because time and time again, we are seeing how this mainstream media is really distorting national and international topics, and they're dividing people, and their endless sort of smearing and distortion doesn't help. And also I'm shocked that some of these the Western lefty media outlets are so critical of things that are happening in other countries that are actually good for human rights and women's rights and LGBTQ rights and all so on, as we've seen in Kashmir, and also with the Citizen Amendment Act and things like that. And so it's like this double standards and hypocrisy and just cluelessness of the truth of the matter. It's scary. It is that's, you gotta really snap out of it. They have to snap out of it, I think, if they want to continue. And this is why we're seeing what's going on in the UK, because I think they had peddled that for such a long time that people really woke up. And I see the US kind of the left side really suffering that fate unless they change their tune, which I'm not so sure they will, but they do have a chance. It's never too late. But I think the world is in a good place. It's a new decade. It's a new year. I only see good things. And I think this is going to be one hell of a year. And I just want the light to shine. And I just want to send love and light to everyone. So,
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that we need some good, positive vibes and in general. And Kirk made a great point. Is we pick and choose when to follow rules and how we look at people. So there has to come a time where we can acknowledge and appreciate cultural differences and the differences of the way that people want to live, as well as being able to respect them on human level. We should respect each other on the human level. And I think it really comes down to having the education, having the conversation, being connected, being able to understand what's going on, the pulse, the thread, the theme of these cultures, of these places and stuff. And we're seeing a lot of that too with, I mean, obviously America is such a big impact on the world. The positive thing that I see is that people care. Now, they may follow the wrong person because of the two-party headspace, but I have to try to understand, the root level of why somebody feels a way. What's the building blocks that's allowing them to feel like this is okay, and while at the same time rechecking myself to make sure that I'm not missing something, because I think that's super important. And as a white guy, learning about other cultures and being kind of ignorant to certain things, and then being aware of things, there's still a balance in how to address that, because you don't want to, it's not about not addressing the elephant in the room or talking about it, but you don't want to, or I don't want to, or we shouldn't, we shouldn't have to dwell on certain things. You know what I mean? But we should be very comfortable with having the conversation about cultural differences, and understanding why why we think the way we think. As cultural, individual. There's a lot of things that blend. So I'm tired of war. I'm tired of the fighting, and I think there's a solid 1,000 people at the very, very top that are assholes, that if we focused our energy on, we just have to destroy their narrative, destroy their power structure. Their whole thing lies within how we think about them and how we look at them. And I think once it's getting there, the internet, we're just waiting for that right shift where there's a slew of leaders that know how to call these motherfuckers out.
Dr. Minghu.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that I was really taken aback by this drone assassination, and I think it's going to have a tremendous effect, and I think in the end, hopefully it will be positive. It certainly has the potential to be. I think that Paul Craig Roberts has an excellent piece that I would recommend to everybody. I put it up on my Facebook page. He talked about how he believes Russia Iran, China, and perhaps India and Turkey should formalize an alliance to sort of counterbalance US recklessness and bring stability to the region. And I think that would help a lot in terms of development, peace, and so forth. Then there's Helga Zepp-LaRouche from the LaRouche movement, who I'm also close to. She's called for, and the Schiller Institute has called for the US, China, and Russia in particular to, you know, sit down and work out this whole jihadi issue, Iran, Iraq, ISIS, Syria, all that, and that it now more than ever it needs to be done. Whatever it is, and then another person who I really like and who I would recommend to all your listeners, let me get his name correct here, is Jason Reza Georgiani. He's an excellent analyst, a Persian exile, but a great analyst of Persian Iranian politics and civilization and history. He's very much against the current regime, but he's a strong Iranian nationalist, and he sees it from he sees the culture from a huge historical perspective, and he puts things in some great perspective. And he, again, talking about the role that Iran should be playing in leadership of the Muslim world to bring stability to the chaos that I was referring to earlier. But whatever happens, I think that, you know, what this is going to do is push some serious realignments. And I think once, you know, a restraint can be had, and unfortunately Iran is going to have to take the hit here, but once some sort of restraint can happen, but these new alliances be put in place, I think it's going to be good for the world. And I think we could finally move forward with a little bit more stability, because after the Cold War, you know, it's just been it's been chaos. It's been chaos, and we need to move in a productive direction. So I hope that comes out of this.
Dr. Ming-Hu, Ms. Upala, I want to thank you very much for your attendance. And with that, let's play that beautiful outro.